For the last few years, my overall recommendation for the best clubs for most newer golfers has been Stix. I have been super impressed by the quality of clubs that Stix provides at the price point they do it at, which is why I'm so excited to now have these. These are the new V2 Perform Series clubs. So the Perform Series is kind of Stix' flagship model. These are the ones that are going to be the best fit for most people. And I gotta say, there's quite a few differences compared to the outgoing model. You know, it's been a couple years since I've done a proper Stix review, so not only are we going to review this set of clubs today and help you figure out if they're right for you, but I'm also giving you a little bit of a rundown of where Stix is at, what the lineup looks like, because over the last few years, a lot of things have changed. They've had different models that include different clubs at different price points. So trying to make sense of it all and try and figure out which ones are actually right for you can be a little bit challenging. So we're gonna do a full Stix update, we're gonna review these clubs, and we're gonna help you figure out if these are actually clubs you should consider buying. So if that sounds interesting, keep watching. Today's video is for you. All right, so some quick history. When Stix first came out, they had one set of clubs. Those are the clubs that are now known as the Perform series. After that, they rolled out a more beginner-focused series that was called the Play series. And then a little bit later on, they rolled out a more player-centric line called the Compete series. Well, now that is all still mostly true with some adjustments. So real quick, let's talk about the current Stix lineup so you kind of know exactly what we're talking about and who this is going to be for, because the Perform series we're talking about today may or may not actually be the right fit for you. So the Perform series have kind of been their flagship series of clubs since the beginning. These are the ones that are kind of the best fit for most people. So they're kind of like right down the middle. Now, they also have a partnership with Nicklaus brands. So they've got a whole Nicklaus brand of clubs that are kind of geared towards the beginning golfer. This is what is replacing what they call the Play series. So the standard set of Nicklaus clubs includes 10 clubs, a bag, a whole lot of Golden Bear branding, and like I said, is generally geared towards the beginning golfer. On the other side of the spectrum, there is the Compete series. So a few years ago, Stix started rolling out individual clubs known as the Compete clubs. So they had a Compete driver, which was a higher end driver. They had a Compete putter, which is a higher end putter. I've got written reviews for both of those clubs that I will link to below. But then over the course of the last year or so, they've rolled out a complete 14 club set for the Compete lineup. So these are going to be geared towards the better golfer. Think at least like 10 to 15 handicap with goals of being better. If you are a 15 handicap, hitting the Compete irons probably going to be a little bit more challenging, a little bit less forgiving than what you're going to get with the other sets of clubs, but they're also going to be excellent clubs to grow into if you are trying to get better. But today we're talking about the new V2 model of the Perform series. So this is kind of their bread and butter. This is not necessarily for the brand new golfer, although I do think this is a really good option if you are looking for your first set of clubs. But these clubs are kind of geared towards people that are like, all right, I've dabbled a little bit in golf. I know I want to take this seriously. I know I want to get better, but I still need a little bit of extra help with distance, forgiveness, and I'm kind of looking for my first real set of golf clubs. So now that I've played with these a bunch, I've hit them a bunch, I've got a really good sense of who they're for. I would say if you are like a low 20s handicap up to like a low teens, these are probably going to be a really good fit. If you're like a 10, 11, 12, and looking to get down into single digits, then I would probably look at the Compete lineup or maybe something from a different brand. As you will see, these will absolutely work. You can totally play these clubs, and I'll talk about my experience with them. But I do think that if you're on the cusp of trying to get into that single digit range, there's probably going to be some better options for you. Okay, so let's talk first impressions and some of the differences between the new V2 model and the older model of the Perform series irons. So right off the bat, you'll notice that there are a lot of similarities between the new version and the old version, especially when it comes to the irons. You'll notice they still have Stix's signature matte black look, which I think honestly looks awesome. I think these are really good looking clubs. The downside you might run into is durability and how they're going to look over a longer period of time and dozens of rounds, but that also comes down to personal preference, and some people definitely like that more worn-in look. On the surface, the irons really don't look that different. Matte black look, nice red accent at the base of the face for alignment, which I think looks really good. I think it's a really nice touch. And that's definitely one of Stix's signature elements across all of their clubs. You will notice the iron design is actually quite a bit different. So instead of having a full traditional cavity back, the new irons have what are called a deep cavity, which is supposed to help with forgiveness and distance. We're going to talk about performance here in a little bit, but otherwise the changes are mostly pretty subtle. One nice quality of life thing that I have liked is the fact that on the older Perform irons, irons. The numbers on the irons were all kind of blacked out as well, so sometimes it was a little bit tough to see if you're trying to grab your club out of your bag quickly. Well, now they've made those numbers in a little bit of a lighter color, which definitely helps with legibility. There's also a slightly different grip pattern on the new clubs. Overall feel I thought was pretty similar. I wouldn't say it's like an upgrade or a downgrade, just a little bit different. The grips are fine. You won't find them to be the most like amazing, tackiest grips in the game, but for the average golfer under typical circumstances, they're totally fine. One thing you should know right up front is that there are only 12 clubs in this set. At first, I was a little disappointed by this because when I think of Stix, like the big selling point is a full set of clubs for right around $1,000. And I don't consider 12 clubs a full set. But the reality is, in most cases, for the golfer this is targeting, you don't actually need those extra clubs. So what's in the bag is a driver, a 3-wood, a 4 hybrid, 5 through pitching wedge on the irons, a 52-degree gap wedge, and a 56-degree sand wedge. So which clubs they've included in this over the years has changed a little bit. One of my older sets had a 60-degree. It also did not have a 5-iron, but it did have a 5-wood. I personally am really glad that they added the 5-iron back in. A 4-iron, a 5-iron, those are two of my personal favorite clubs. I know those can potentially be a little bit harder to hit than a hybrid or a wood for some newer golfers, but I like the added control that it gives you, and I think that you're still pretty much covered having the 3-wood and the 4 hybrid. One of the major knocks I had on previous versions of this set were the head covers. The head covers I thought you could basically just take and throw away. Well, they are now better. Not great, but they're totally serviceable and a big step up compared to the outgoing model. They're a little bit easier to get on and off. I like the black and red colorway, and although I wish they kind of toned it back with some of the Stix branding in a few different places that we'll talk about, these are totally serviceable and will do the job. I will say, while we're talking about head covers, the one head cover that I really do think missed the mark is the putter head cover. One nice thing is that they actually included the Compete version of the putter. So we'll talk about performance, review my experience with this in a little bit, but I want to say the head cover for me just doesn't seem like it fits. Like, it's hard to get it to like magnet back on. It feels a little bit too small. I'm actually pretty disappointed with the putter cover. So this is one that I would probably look to switch out at some point pretty soon if you decide to buy this. And then finally, we have the bag. The Stix bag is a nice upgrade to the previous bag. The previous bag, honestly, for a $100 golf bag, that's what it costs. It's $100 extra if you want to get the bag with this. So for this full 12 club set, it is $999. And if you want the bag, then it's $1,099. I do wish that they could have gotten the full set with the bag to fall into that $999 price point, but also I like the fact they give you the option of whether or not you want to buy the bag or not. So again, there's like the big Stix on the side of the bag, and don't get me wrong, I got nothing against the Stix brand. I love the Stix brand. I've recommended these clubs to a whole bunch of people over the years, including my wife. My wife is using a set of Stix clubs. We'll talk about that in a second. But the reality is when it comes to what the brand is, it's not like it's this big aspirational brand like Titleist, for instance. It is still generally a direct-to-consumer box set of clubs that's very good, but I don't feel like most people are like, yeah, it's like, I want Stix all over everything. So the fact you've got the big Stix on the side, you've got the Stix on the head cover, we'll talk about the design of the irons and the woods, but you also now have Stix in a much more prominent position across all the woods and the driver. I like the old model that just had like a little logos, a little bit more discreet. So this is starting to get a little overboard with branding for my personal taste, but honestly, this doesn't affect the performance of the clubs in any way. I just personally would have liked to see it a little bit more subdued. But getting back to the bag, it is totally serviceable. The straps aren't necessarily the most padded you're ever gonna see. The top handle isn't the thickest or the most robust. The zippers are totally serviceable, but they're not the absolute highest quality. But again, for a $100 golf bag, it is very good at that price point. And I think for most people that are going to be buying this set of clubs, I think one of, if not the biggest reason, is because it's just so easy. It's simple. You don't have to go get fit. You don't have to make a whole bunch of decisions. You just answer a couple quick questions that Stix walks you through, and boom, you have a wonderful set of golf clubs that show up at your door, so you can think more about playing and getting better than the equipment. Because honestly, at this point, if you are a newer golfer, it is less about the equipment and more just getting out there and practicing and getting some reps. So I love the fact that for a very reasonable price, you can get this included and be on your way with minimal hassle. Hey, real quick, just wanted to let you know, if you decide that this set of golf clubs is right for you, you can use the code BE50. It's gonna save you $50 on a full set of Stix. As you might expect, if you use that code, I will get a commission. If you think that makes me biased, totally understand. Go do all your own research. Don't use the code if you don't want to. Go find another code or whatever. But everything I do here at Breaking 80 is honestly just to help you find the right products for your needs. So if you did find this useful and you do decide these are the right clubs for you, using that code helps me out a lot. All right, back to the review. Okay, so now let's talk about performance, because realistically, that's probably what you care about most. So one of the things that I did first is I went out and I did a full bag mapping session with these clubs. So I wanted to get a sense of how far these are going, what the trajectory looked like, and how they compared to the existing clubs that I'm using on a regular basis. So right now, the irons that I've been using are the PXG 0311 XP Gen 7. So those are the clubs that I've been using for about a year and a half now, and one of the things that I found when I switched to those clubs was all of a sudden every club was going about 10 yards further. I did this, that coincided with a little bit of a grip change, which helps, but compared to the Mizuno irons that I was using before, the PXG ones definitely had a stronger loft. So my 7 iron with the PXG was more like the distance from my 6 iron of the Mizuno. So I've been really curious to go out with these Stix clubs and see how distances perform compared to those PXGs. I didn't look up the loft differences beforehand, I'm going to talk about that in just a second, but my expectation was that I was probably going to lose about 5 to 7 yards per club with the Stix versus the PXG. And that's what made this all the more surprising. After doing the bag mapping, which I actually did twice due to technical error, so I actually hit like 6, 7, 8 balls with all of these clubs to get a really good sense of distance. What I found with the Stix clubs is that on average, they were within about 2 yards of my distances with the PXGs. So the Stix clubs definitely fly further than I was expecting them to. But then I went and I looked up the lofts, and this is where I expected much stronger lofts. I expected them to be just as strong as the PXGs. Well, they weren't. In fact, across the board, they were 2 to 3 degrees less for every iron compared to the PXG 0311 XPs. So the lofts on these Stix clubs were more in line with the P model of the PXG. They're more in line with the P790 from TaylorMade. So while compared to like some player irons, they might still be fairly strongly lofted, they're definitely not the most strongly lofted clubs out there. So what does this mean in more basic terms? Well, it means that I'm hitting it just as far with higher lofts, which means that on my approach shots, I'm going to be more likely to be able to actually hold the green a little bit better. And overall, I would say that this has been true. I will say, especially in wind, I have had occasional shots that have tended to balloon a little bit, but I think a lot of that is probably due to the graphite shafts that I've got in my clubs. When it comes to shafts, depending on the level of golfer you are, I would probably personally lean towards the steel shafts. If you are just getting started and you're more of a beginner golfer, then I think graphite might be the way to go here. But with these clubs in particular, I think it's going to be the same that I found with the previous generation of Perform. I like the steel better. They're a little bit heavier. They feel a little bit more stable. I'm a little bit more confident with them, and you get a little bit more control. So when it comes to distance performance, I have been really, really impressed with these clubs. And this goes all the way up to the driver as well. So the driver that I've been using most recently is the Callaway Elite, which I love. It is the absolute best driver that I have ever used. My drives with the included Stix driver, they were about 7 to 10 yards off on average, so I definitely wasn't hitting it quite as far, but this also does feel like a very forgiving club. I will say one thing I noticed about the driver at address, and this is the same as what I experienced with the previous generation of the Perform driver, is the face just looks kind of like bulbous. Like it has like kind of a unique look that for me isn't necessarily the most confidence inspiring, but then when I hit it, I was always pleased with how it felt off the face, the distance, and the forgiveness. All right, so even the driver, you know, like I said, at address, I don't necessarily love the look of it. The new carbon fiber they have on the top is straight out of the Compete series and looks really nice. When it comes to performance, I really like the way this thing feels. Yeah, good distance, good feel, still forgiving. Overall, driver just feels like a really solid option, especially for the newer golfer. I've not really had any big ballooning slices with the Stix driver, which tends to be my big miss. And that's one thing that historically you found with Stix clubs is they do have a little bit of a draw bias. Most beginners, that's going to be their big miss, is that big slice. And so historically, these clubs have been designed to kind of help compensate for that just a little bit. I do think that the driver, just aside from that one critique about how the face looks, it performs extremely well for the price point, and I think it's going to be a great first driver for most of the people that are looking at this set of clubs. I do wish, however, that for the maybe people that are on the better end of the spectrum, they made it a little bit easier to switch out this driver for the Compete driver for people that want a club that has a little bit more control, a little bit more customization, and is just generally a club that is geared towards people that are a little bit better drivers of the golf ball. When it comes to that draw bias that I just talked about, with the old series of Perform, I really noticed this with the irons. Like to the point where I would hit it, and instead of having like a big like fade like I normally have, have, the ball was actually drawing more than I expected it to. With the new Perform series, that doesn't seem like it's quite as pronounced, but what I have found is that control with these clubs really feels better than it did with the old model. I really feel like I've been able to kind of say, okay, I want to hit this type of shot, and the clubs do what I want them to. It doesn't feel like I'm having to overly compensate one way or another. They feel very focused, they feel very direct, and they do that without sacrificing forgiveness. I think that's kind of the hallmark of these clubs. They have to be forgiving because you're trying to help people feel better about golf. Like the whole point of Stix, like their whole brand and their ethos is all about helping people have more fun on the golf course, get better, and do it at a price point that isn't going to completely gouge you. With these clubs compared to the previous generation, I feel like you have more control, just as much forgiveness, and it tones down that draw bias just a little bit, which I think is going to be a good thing for all but the biggest slicers of the golf ball. When it comes to putter performance, this is actually on paper the best club in the bag. So it actually includes their Compete Series putter, which I have found to be very good. The weighting feels really good, the feel off the face feels very good, and I found it really easy to control the distance of your putts with this putter as well. The only caveat to that I will say is this is a center shafted putter. Some people love the look of a center shafted putter, and others they don't like it as much. If you're a new golfer, you may not even know. You may not know the difference. So it's not necessarily something that's a positive or a negative either way, but it is something that is worth mentioning. So with these newer clubs, you have great distance, you have good control. What are the downsides? And I will say for me, I think the biggest downside I found with these clubs comes down to feel. And specifically, I've noticed it with the higher irons like the 9-iron and the pitching wedge. Performance has been great. Distance has been good, loft's been good, control's been good, but the feel of the pitching wedge in particular, it just feels kind of hollow to me. And this is something that you will typically find with more game improvement oriented clubs. It just doesn't feel quite as solid as I would have liked it to be. And honestly, I'm not sure that it feels as solid as the previous generation of the Perform clubs do. I do not notice this with the longer irons, the 5, the 6, the 7, and I don't notice it with the wedges like the 52 and the 56, but for some reason with that 9-iron and pitching wedge, it just has this kind of like hollow feel that I don't love. I got the 9-iron here, and like I said, you know, the result is good, but just listen to it. Isn't that kind of like pingy sound? It's kind of loud, high-pitched, pingy, a little hollow. That's kind of how it feels as well. I mean, control is great. I like the ball flight. Everything about the result I love, but that sound and the feel, just a little lacking for me. Let's contrast that with the 5-iron. See, completely different sound. It's like a more solid thud as opposed to a high-pitched ping. So it sounds more substantial as opposed to hollow, like you get with the 9 and the pitching wedge. But the result, again, just kind of dead on. So I think if you're playing these, I think that feel is something that you get used to. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's a reason not to buy these clubs. But I will say, as I started hitting those two clubs, it was something that I noticed, and it just didn't feel quite as good as the previous generation for me. So all of this brings us to the question of, should you buy Stix? And honestly, I think the answer is yes. If you are considering Stix, if it feels like it is a good fit for you, then it probably is. I really think these are a good set of clubs for everywhere from the brand new golfer up to about like a 10 to 12 handicap. One of the things I like about this over some other super game improvement clubs, if you get some of the like absolute like super game improvement where all they're trying to do is help you get the ball up in the air, they're not really worried about anything else, I think what will happen is you'll tend to grow out of those clubs pretty quickly as you become a better golfer. These, while still extremely forgiving clubs in the grand scheme of things, are maybe not quite as helpful and not quite as forgiving as the most super game improvement clubs out there, but what's great about them is it's going to teach you to be a better golfer, and these are clubs that you will be able to grow into a little bit. These are a full-fledged, very good set of clubs. It isn't just a like beginner box set of mediocre clubs. These are very good golf clubs, and I've been really impressed with how they have performed on the course. I mentioned that my wife is playing the Nicholas women's clubs, which have been awesome. She had an old like Nike set that were like 15 years old, and even as a pretty new golfer, we noticed the difference in her game right away. So she has the 10 club Nicholas set, which has been perfect because really she plays like the same 4 or 5 clubs. And so if if you're that type of golfer where you know you're not going to be hitting every club in the bag, you hit like a driver, a wedge, a 7-iron, and a putter, and that's kind of it, then you might look at saving a little bit of money with one of those Nicklaus sets. But all that to say, I'm really pleased with this new set from Stix. It does feel like, for the most part, it's a meaningful upgrade over the previous generation Perform. Like I said, there are a couple minor issues, the feel on some of the clubs, as well as some of the branding that I'm not necessarily as big of a fan of. But overall, the fact that the distance is great, the control feels really good, and just the value you get from this set is one of the best options out there for people that are looking for a set of golf clubs like this. And with that, my name's Sean Ogle. I'm the founder of this thing here, Breaking 80. If you're not subscribed yet and you enjoyed this video and you're still watching, I would love it if you hit subscribe. We got videos twice a week talking about all of the coolest stuff in golf, from cool golf courses to cool golf tech to golf products. And I would love to be able to continue making videos like this for you. And so one of the best ways you can help support the channel is to just subscribe and watch the videos. Along with that, if you do decide these are the right clubs for you, or any Stix clubs, you can use the code BE50. It's gonna save you $50 on a full set of Stix clubs. You're gonna save a little money, you're gonna get some great golf clubs, and it helps support all the work I do here on the channel. With that, if you're still not sure what to watch next, I would go take a look at this video here, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace.